Hello and welcome to this edition of Leadbacker's exclusive webinar series, a collection of conversations to keep you up to speed with relevant leadership topics you need to make you and your business succeed. Our goal, to provide you with actionable take-home tips which you can start implementing straight away, even after this webinar. In this talk, we kick off with our heart rate monitor. I'm your host, Neil Mc Ardle, and I'm joined today in studio by Norbert Hölzl, CEO and founder of Leadbacker. Norbert's background spans 20 years plus, where he specialized as an executive advisor and change guide with multinational companies across Europe. Also online is Meggy Sailer, founder of Monday Squares and recent Leadbacker People Council member. Meggy has successfully built and scaled global high-tech, venture capital and privately funded startups such as Tesla, Lilium Aviation and BlackBerry. Thank you all for joining us online. As this is an interactive webinar, please feel free to write any questions you have in the chat and we will discuss them at the end. Last week, Leadbacker conducted a poll asking about which approaches ensure the ideal employee experience. Before we jump into these responses, I'd like to pass over to you, Meggy. What is the employee experience and why is it so important?
That's great. Thank you, Neil. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Norbert. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited to talk to you about employee engagement. And let's kick it off with one of the most important questions, really. What is employee experience and why is it important? Now, throughout my career, I think there's various things that I would say that I've observed, but also that we know as a HR capacity. So obviously employee experience, is the experience of a person that a person has within your company. So it's how they observe leadership, is how they observe your company culture. It's about the collaboration they have and the tools they use, the communication between each other, the leadership, and how they perform their everyday work, right? So this is basically how your employee judges the overall experience within the company. And I'd say there's a real significance between building a solid employee experience, because that actually translates into your employee's lifetime value. And as a company, you're always looking for the best and highest return of investment. And obviously people are at the heart of your business. So you want to make sure that if you have a solid employee experience, you increase the employee lifetime value. You want to ensure that you understand how long the people stay within your company. You want to understand how they progress within the company. You want to understand how they fulfill their own destiny and the company's destiny. So it's really interesting when you look at EX, employee experience, because it really should be at the heart of companies and all HR departments. So that's why creating this journey is quite important. And actually, I was thinking a little bit about strategies that you can create around, creating a good employee experience and making sure that you get the important points. And if you think about strategies and how to do that, as a company, one of my suggestions would be is to sit and think, where are we? So where are we as a business? So run surveys, run surveys and get feedback from your employees and understand where you are as a company. Sort of take the pulse, right? Figure it out. And then sit together as a HR capacity with people within the business and map it out. What would be an ideal employee experience? Today, you might hear the odd personal story and journey from myself, just to make sure that we fully get back into the spirit of immersing what it's like as an employee. So I think it's really good to think about what would an employee experience look like. So map it out and then think about how do we want this to affect recruitment, retention, engagement, employer branding. So for me, employee experience is all about focusing on people because they're literally the heartbeat of your organization.
Thank you, Meggy. Now over to you, Norbert. What is the employee experience and why is it so important?
Yeah, just picking up where Meggy ended, it's about the heartbeat of the organization, and that's why we have come up with a tool, if you want, or with a workflow that measures this heartbeat, the vital signs of an organization. And we all are employees at some point in the organizations we work for. And when we remember where does our individual employee experience start? It actually starts in the recruiting process, in the onboarding, and then through a life cycle. Like everything in life is having a life cycle. And after this life cycle, we try to phase out from an organization and we become ideally an alumni. Yeah, like a messenger, a positive messenger about the organization that we've been working with, or maybe a customer or a client for the organization that we've been working with. So that goes through a life cycle, and through this life cycle, we have plenty of change moments where we take over maybe first-time leadership, where we take over a new team, where we return from paternity leave or maternity leave, or from sabbaticals where we did some training and studies. So these are all change moments. And here we set up a workflow that's measuring these change moments and these well-being and engagement rates throughout the employee life cycle. And it was very essential for me to establish that, because we can give back so much of our experience that we all had in our previous years in our organizations, but also from universities that we're gathering here together. And we can help organizations to measure and to visualize these vital signs. And vital signs come together from, on the one hand, from the recommendation about the brand, about the employer. So it's the recommendation of the employer brand. It's the second factor is like the satisfaction with the workplace and the well-being at work. And the third part is what kind of perspectives, what kind of development roadmap do I see within these organizations? And this altogether builds the engagement index. And through our system, where we're gathering lots of data in these organizations, we can identify what are peaks of engagement levels and what are like pockets of disengagements. And here we can impose then improvement measures. And here's a little idea as well from practice that we've just seen is it isn't really enough just to ask your people about their well-being, but we also need to involve them in the improvement processes. They need to be involved in the projects and programs to improve their workplace. So it's really essential to establish somewhat what we call a closed loop learning process, where we do measure, but we also do engage in the improvement process with the people. So that's kind of the essential strategy that we are deploying here at Leadbacker.
Thank you, Norbert. I'd like to pass back over to you, Meggy. You talked a little bit about strategies about the ideal employee experience. What are some strategies which listeners could implement to actualize these changes?
Yeah, sounds really good. Maybe to start this off is actually, I'd actually like to give a little bit of data, right? Because I think that's important, especially when we are within the business and a HR function as such. Before I go into the options that you have, I think it's really interesting to understand from various studies that we have looked at and what we know from Leadbacker as a tool is that good employee experience leads to bigger profits. Right. So I think that's really important when you think about, tools like Leadbacker and what you're doing within your organization. And various studies have actually shown that customer satisfaction and innovation can increase by 25% and create those higher profits with regards to companies who don't have a very high employee experience. So if you keep your employee experience high, if you have your employee lifetime value high, you will generate bigger profits. So there's a lot of studies out there. So I thought that was really interesting actually to share about that and also understand, what you could do from a HR perspective for the business. And when it comes to actually implement employee engagement, I think it's actually fairly simple because it's all about rewarding and celebrating. It's all about thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What do people essentially need as individuals? We are looking for safety as people, right? Regardless of where you are in the world, regardless of the industry that you work in, we're always looking for safety. We're looking for recognition. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're looking for love, for acceptance.
Indeed.
Yeah, exactly. And actually with that, if you think about your employee experience, if you crack the code, of humans, and you truly understand what they're after, you can create that within your employee experience. And that's why I'm saying, keep people connected, reward and celebrate your employees, make them feel heard, communicate with them. So
Indeed,
there's simple things like that. Yeah.
This leads me on to my next question, Norbert. How important is the respect and the ability to grant professional autonomy to the individual in a workplace?
I think this is key. It's though it's also built on trust big time. So if you can establish this trust up front, I think it must be established first, and also transparency about the outcomes. And together with trust and transparency, I think this autonomy is definitely a must. We call it like the democratization of opinion in an organization, but also the democratization of leadership, that we want to establish leadership in every cell of an organization. And that is like the consequence of autonomy and trust, yeah? Mm-hmm. That you enable every cell of an organization, the smallest cell, the smallest group or team, or even individuals to take over leadership, yeah? So it's not just in the top management, but it's in every smallest cell of an organization. And that only works, what Meggy said as well, through connection. And the connection that we see here very much, and I think, Meggy, this is also something that you might have in mind when you talk about connection, is the connection of the individual purpose with the organizational purpose. So there needs to be a link. And as an individual, I need to deduct meaning out of that. So what really can I change in my environment? How can I impact my environment? How can I impact my own development within this organization? So my own perspective and roadmap of growth. And it's about growth, it's about connection, it's about purpose fit. And these are all facets that contribute to these vital factors of an organization, whom we are measuring. And through these data, organizational developers and people developers get the evidence to take improvement decisions. And this is a very beautiful job that we're actually doing here, and I'm really happy that we can share this experience now. And there's plenty of client histories behind it and experiences behind it. But I also want to reflect to what Meggy said, that it's at the end of the day, it's also impacting the profit of an enterprise. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we are now offering also to measure these bottom line KPIs, what people engagement is really impacting in the profit and loss statement. Yeah. And there's 4 to 5 KPIs depending on the organization that really matter and make a difference. And the first one is, of course, the level of unforced attrition. So how big is your unforced attrition? And the relevant costs related to it. And then as well, the recruiting costs that come with it, that's the second factor. Then we have what you see is the short-term absenteeism goes up or down depending on the engagement level. And here we have improvement rates of a factor by 5 to 10 of the levels of short-term absenteeism. And these are absenteeism periods of up to a few days over the year. So then other KPIs are the people productivity. So it's a pure input-output factor. And last but not least, what we see makes a big difference is also the customer lifetime value, because if you have engaged employees, you also do have engaged customers and clients. So all these together, these KPIs make a big difference on your bottom line of your profit and loss statement. And we're just now beginning to measure these connections between engagement, between autonomy, between leadership in every cell of an organization and those bottom line KPIs. And that's a really exciting story. We're cooperating here with 2 universities, and we're happy to share the insights then maybe in another webinar.
Thank you. Meggy, I'd like to pass over to you. We have spoken a little bit about the individual and the promotion of personal growth. Could you talk more about the macro, about how it's important to instill a shared purpose for employee engagement?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I'm going to answer that with a personal story, because I really
Go
think
ahead.
it's important that we bring us as individuals into this as well, right? Because when we are an organization, we're always looking at the return of investment and profit side of things. But I think it's really important to remind us as people, as how we've, or people leaders in this case, of how employees feel when they can work towards personal growth, when they have the feeling of achievement, with being given autonomy and having a shared purpose. So what actually came to my mind here is my time at Tesla. I've worked, of course, at various startup scale-ups over time. But I've seen one particular thing that I find is very, very useful. And with Tesla specifically, and also the other companies that I helped build, it was actually to create the shared purpose. Why is shared purpose important? It actually sort of marries you as an employee to your company, to the mission, to the vision of the company, and that translates into better employee experience and employee lifetime value. So when I think about Tesla, for example, I started there when the company had 30 people in Europe and 300 people worldwide, and that's over 10 years ago now. And Elon was always very clear with the purpose of the company and the mission of the company, and it was all about accelerating transport, as some of you listeners probably know. And it was great, because Tesla created that environment where you were given full autonomy, you were given the okay to fail. And that was actually incredibly important for somebody who comes from a Germanic environment. I come from Austria, from Vienna. I've grown up in a culture where failure isn't necessarily accepted. And then you go to American cultures and companies like Tesla, where you are told by the CEO that you can make, you can fail, you should fail. And if you're not failing and trying hard enough, you're actually not doing your job. So if I think about what I have been through as an employee, being able to become a manager, having been given the autonomy, having had the shared purpose, it helped us recruit the right people. It helped us to understand how we interacted with each other. It helped us to understand how we interacted with our customers, and clients as such. So actually having a shared purpose is very important for your lifetime value. Opportunities and growth are incredibly important for any company, regardless if it's a startup or not. And being able to measure that in an HR capacity is even more important to show back to leadership of where the company does particularly well and where it can improve and do better when it comes to an employee experience.
Thank you. Well, that leads us to the next question about monitoring and measuring. This one's for you, Norbert. How is Leadbacker using sensor technology to address further employee needs? The name of this webinar is the heart rate monitor. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the sensor technology. Yeah,
the sensor technology works very simple. We give every person in the organization a voice. And and it's not just asking about their well-being, but it's providing a role model, a best practice role model that can be triggered either centrally through HR, but also decentrally through the cells, the leadership cells in an organization. And it's a cloud service, can be activated within 24 hours, and we give everyone a voice with that, and that's a beautiful thing. The key thing is, again, that we take these voices seriously, that we start working with that, prioritizing, grouping, and establishing improvement cycles. And so that's part of this sensor technology, to use the data together with the people, to involve the people, and to create a better working environment here. Yeah, so that's the idea. I see there's also some other questions from the audience, so maybe we can refer to that. Yeah,
sure. Yeah. Let's take a question we have about we mentioned about the HR department. Have the duties of HR departments adapted to these changes?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting conversation to have. So I think it depends on where you sit within the world. So where are you geographically? In some countries, that is driven a lot harder, and HR duties have adapted towards it. I do have conversations with people, though, where they sit in companies or environments where it is expected from them It's expected from a HR capacity to be more human-centric. It's expected from a HR capacity to provide more data, to provide insight actually into an employee life cycle and into the employee lifetime value, basically, and where the company does well or not. But in essence, HR hasn't yet adapted because they haven't been enabled to do so. So it's actually really important from a HR perspective to sit down and think strategically about what it is that the business will do in the next 12 to 18 months and be on the forefront at the important conversations with the sort of C-suite to understand where are we going. Mm-hmm. And then being able to have the right tools to measure and report back. That's really important, right? So obviously you need to figure out what the business wants and how you can come in.
Yeah, thank you. Norbert, could you add to that? Could you talk a little bit about closed loop learning? I know we were talking about this before the webinar. Yeah. Could you share that?
Yeah. Maybe to the previous question, I have one more comment as well. What we see from practice is that HR departments and teams have the choice either to build an own muscle, yeah, or to keep consulting with physiotherapists, yeah. So because you definitely, as an HR team, you need to become experimental. You need to build your own capabilities of providing service levels to people, to your employee. Yeah, and it's just not just the bread and butter services like payroll and time management. Yeah, it's about really engagement services here. And here we see that it differs a lot with the maturity of the organizations on the one hand, but also differs on the business cultures. So we see a high adaptation rate in the Anglosphere, where HR teams become increasingly powerful because they're managing the most important asset in an organization, which is us humans here. I think that must be clear that the only way is to build the muscle themselves and not to keep consulting any physiotherapists in the future. And yeah, so about this, yeah, sorry.
Yes, I asked you if you'd like to comment on the closed loop learning. Would you like to share what we discussed earlier?
Yeah, maybe we give, there's two questions from audience that we can pull them forward.
Okay, yeah. Okay, this is quite a practical one. Maybe you can take this one, Meggy. What is the best way to keep teams motivated and engaged? The $1 million question.
Yeah, it is for every company, isn't it, right? And I think it actually starts really simple. And that's about treating people with respect. It is as simple as it sounds. I think we're all human beings, and going back to Maslow's hierarchy, we want to be respected. Keeping teams happy and engaged is definitely about empowerment. I have really seen teams do the best work and perform at the best when they are given the autonomy to grow. The connection is really important. The connection part from a sense that the company is connected. They understand what the requirements are of the business. They understand where the business is heading and what they need to be done. So connecting your teams and not creating silos, it's super important. And then we did talk before about rewarding and celebrating. We live in our culture is changing. Our culture has changed over the last 2 years dramatically, but even before. So when you think about the next generations to come into work, they work very differently to how I might have worked, or how others might have worked for the last 10, 15, 20 years. So we need to think about reward and celebrating. We need to think about facilitating growth, because it's all about facilitating growth, especially for the new generation coming in. So I'd say to keep teams motivated and happy, you need to try your very best to cover all of these cycles. The war of talent is real, so you really need to think about how, as a company, do you get your people in, create a good employee experience, create good employer branding, keep your people and get new people into the business. So
yeah, you brought up a nice point there, contrasting the past and the present.
Yeah.
Maybe this one is for you, Norbert. Do employees have more power now than before? And if so, how?
I would definitely say they have more power now. They have the opportunity to participate and to contribute. They also have not only the opportunity, but also the responsibility. And I think this comes together as well with the distributed leadership that we're having because of complexity, because of this real-time character of work, because of ever-increasing complexity, as I said, the VUCA world, but also because of multiple crises that we need to manage now. We are in a permanent risk management mode and crisis management mode, and this has to be done decentrally. Yeah, but I also want to add a notation here on what Meggy said about the best way to keep teams motivated is we need to recognize that we probably do have the most engaged employee in the world already in our teams and in our organizations. Yeah, and we just need to spot them. We need to locate them. We need to understand their talents and their strengths and start building on that. Yeah, and I think this is the most critical leadership task that we have, and it can't be done by HR. It has to be done by leaders in every cell of the organization, and that helps you to raise the engagement level and to really appreciate and connect to these people, to these highly engaged people. And this is actually my comment to how to keep the teams motivated and engaged
could I
locating them and by supporting them to grow.
Yes, Meggy, go ahead.
Sorry, I do apologize.
Do jump in.
Actually, yes, I wanted to add something here with Norbert that Norbert touched on. I think we are living in a world where leadership has become all important. You know, especially because we're living in a world that is we're constantly dealing with uncertainty, right? And so we really need good leadership to help us navigate those waters. And obviously the recognition is just one part, but it is so important that when you think about employee experience, to really understand that there's powerful technology to enable the HR teams, but it is the job of everybody within our organization, within the leadership team. So from a HR capacity, we just need to know how we get to the table and bringing the data to have these conversations and bringing everybody within the business on board to help the employee engagement, because it's an effort of everybody. It's not just an isolated team in recruitment that does this or somewhere else. When I worked with various companies where we were most successful in times of growth or keeping people, it was when everybody was aligned in the organization, when there was true leadership in one way or the other, where everybody was connected and the message was very clear to the employees. So I just wanted to add that on the leadership part as well, because again, it does contribute to the satisfaction of your teams.
You mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Meggy. I might just get you on one point.
Yeah.
What are the first steps that someone could take to build the psychological safety in the workplace you talked about?
Yeah. So I think a great question. So I do really think it depends on your business's needs, right? So potentially a startup might have slightly different needs when it comes to safety, because by definition, a startup is very uncertain, you know, in terms of how it grows and how fast it grows, and sometimes where the business is or the plans are. So with that in mind, what you need to understand is, you know, safety in the sense of knowing what you do every day isn't important to employees, but what you can for sure say is that self-development is important. That's why people join a startup, right? Or self-fulfillment, you know, recognition. We all want recognition. So first and foremost, when it comes to psychological safety, Maslow's hierarchy is a great tool, but I think as an organization, you really need to understand where you are and what you need to succeed in the next 3 to 5 years. What are the most important behaviors that you need to get in there, you know, to fulfill those psychological needs, those safety needs. So it's all about figuring out what the business really needs in order to then go and build psychological safety. But very simply put, psychological safety starts from everywhere, top down ideally, because depending on where you sit in Europe or abroad, depending on what the culture is that you're in, it could be a top-down culture. So initially you need to make sure that the top-down creates an environment where people feel heard and people feel safe, so they can speak and so that they can speak up, you know, that they can bring in their experience, because you really want to make sure that you create an environment that thrives. In some companies, you can do that bottom up, because like Norbert said before, it's actually really important to empower your employees. So they should also feel that they can be part of that growth and that change. So it depends on your organization, but best way always to create psychological safety is that whenever you have a change in the business, you get your people on board, by communicating as much as possible and involving them in events and, you know, doing service and giving them feedback on the service and following up and showing what you have done to improve certain things that they might have commented on. So that's the first way to start, I'd say, with psychological safety, if that doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah, some great tips there, Meggy. Thanks. We're coming to a close of this short webinar. Norbert, Meggy discussed a little bit about top-down leadership. Would you like to finish on, you mentioned about distributed leadership. How important is delegation in the modern workplace?
Just like that, delegation. Right on.
Distributed leadership,
yeah. I think we touched on that before. Because of the increasing speed and complexity and multiple crises, there's no single person that can manage an organization. So you need to distribute decisions. You need to bring decisions to the front line, where actually most of information is available, where you're in touch with your clients and the daily business. This is where leadership and decision making has to be established. Yeah. And this is only working through engaged, empowered employees that are trusted, but also through transparency about clear objectives and milestones. And part of this transparency is not only OKRs, objectives and key results, but also the KPIs that we were talking before. So we always have to have a look on the business essentials. And again, this has to be established in every cell and not just at the CEO office. Yeah. But the smallest teams and organizational cells, they need the leadership. They need to have the accountability as well for their results. Yeah. So you need to have the transparency and the trust in there. I think this is all being said before, but there's a clear concept behind it, and we're supporting that through the workflows and tools that you can get at Leadbacker. And it's actually the essence of 25 years of experience working in these fields, and we're really grateful now to have to share these experiences with our clients and to contribute here to the well-being and engagement of their people.
Meggy, any closing comments?
Yeah, I think obviously it's like I said, it's great to be here. I think when we talk about employee experience, it's really important. I think there's no way around the modern world anymore to say that we can't think about employee lifetime value. We can't think about the employee's experience, because that is what we demand as individuals, right? That is what we expect. We are all different. And we expect these days that our work environments work around us and not the other way around. And with all the technology that we have specifically, you know, I think as a company, you need to future-proof yourself, right? To make sure that you have the right tools, you have the right system, you understand how your employees feel and are engaged at any given time. That is essential for you to be successful in business now and in the future. I'd say that's it from me.
Great. Thank you, Meggy.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to thank you for joining us, Meggy, and we hope to have you on again. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope the viewers at home did. Norbert, thank you for joining. If you're interested and you like these type of talks, please stay tuned to our LinkedIn account, and we will have regular updates about future webinars. Thank you.